Where have I been? I know. I'm terribly sorry. Also, where am I right now? Well, a lot has happened, and I've left you out there for a month without any new episodes. The last episode, I was talking to Rome Ramirez. I was in Lazy Pickle Studios, and then all of a sudden, it was like the entire month of July, no new Waterproof Records episode, and I'm sorry. I apologize. But if you had been following the show, you would know I had to move. I moved houses. I moved to a completely new home, and so I had to uproot and tear down the place that I was recording at home, and I had to get settled here first. Now, most of you listen to the show and you don't watch it, but there are those of you who check it out online, and I appreciate you so much. And those who watch it will see I have a completely new background. But here's the exciting news. I'm not even done with this space yet. This is just pretty bare bones, not necessarily bare bones, but it's just getting started. I have some very exciting lighting and background and things that I'm going to be building into the space, but I couldn't leave you hanging any longer. You waited an entire month, and I'm back. It's August. We're ready to dive in, and we're going to be doing a pretty big album, a huge album in my life, a huge one that really defines the 90s, and it's the last album we get from a little-known band called Nirvana. I'm sure you've heard of them. So, now that we had that little preamble, let's get into it. Let's dive into and talk about this very important, noisy departure from the poppy record that the world is introduced to and really is the last thing that Kurt Cobain gives us before he dies. So, it is time to talk about Nirvana, In Utero. Let's go.
Things are gonna change. I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna...
Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records with Jacob Gibbons.
You know, as I think to cover these albums, it's crazy because I'll be looking up and I'm like, the 30th anniversary was already 2 years ago. I wish I had done it for the 30th anniversary. But again, too many albums, so little time. And a lot of times these ideas to do a show about a certain album, they spark and they come at a very specific time. And I can't guide the muse. It just arrives. I hear a song or I think of something and I go, it's time to talk about that album. That's why I say it that way. But hey, what, you think I'm out of practice? You think I don't know that I need to tell you about DistroKid? Because DistroKid is still with me. They hung out for a month and they were like, you know, hey, what's going on? Why aren't there any new episodes? But I'm back, DistroKid, and you need to be on DistroKid if you use my link, distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof to get 30% off of the music you upload for an entire year. If you use that link, it's going to save you 30%, and that's very significant for all of us starving artists in the world. So make sure you use my link and you can save 30% off. I use it. You should use it too. And thank you, DistroKid, for being a sponsor on this show. I super appreciate it. In Utero. So I have, of course, covered Nevermind on the podcast. I had to do that one relatively early on the show because of the landmark changing moment in terms of music in the 90s and just where it starts and everything that falls after that. And of course, I'll probably cover Bleach and maybe get to Incesticide. But In Utero is definitely the second most important Nirvana album to me personally. While I had bought Nevermind, and then I'd gotten a copy on cassette of Bleach, which I still have and I've made videos with. That's the original cassette I had. I liked it as well. I liked it. It was like, Bleach was like getting really rough around the edges, raw sounding band. And you know me, I liked the songs. There's a lot of great stuff on Bleach, but I was so excited to see what Nirvana was going to do next. Incesticide, like we know, is more of a compilation of B-sides, and it's not really a studio album. So the world was kind of waiting with bated breath, like, what is Nirvana going to do next? And of course, they gave us this, because it really was a representation of how much Kurt did not like being in the limelight, being famous, being on a major record label, having success, being all over MTV, and in the end, releasing an album like Nevermind that he considered to be too polished, too sleek. For a guy like him, he wanted that raw power. He wanted something dynamic. He wanted it to be, a little bit more complex. He wanted to have that rough around the edges stuff that you heard on Bleach to better represent the stuff that he listened to. So he decided, we got to get Steve Albini on this. So Steve Albini did not like Nirvana before this. It's not that he had anything personal against them, but when rumors had begun spreading about him possibly producing their next album, right away he was like calling the media and being like, that's not true. I'm not going to be producing this band. And he said, and I quote, that's just REM with a fuzz box. Because Steve's problem with Nirvana was he hears Nevermind. He hears this sleek, polished album that he thinks is a very poor representation of this sound that's emerging from Seattle, right? He's like, that's not at all what it is. That's just packaged so nicely, and it really turns him off. But he doesn't hold it against Nirvana. He says, they're just like the kids that I'm working with. They're just swept up and under the thumb of labels and the whole scene. So there's a little bit of a debating as to whether or not he's going to take on producing. And I believe the band Nirvana is touring, and they're recording some demos in Brazil, and they send some to Steve Albini, and then he sends back, work he's doing on PJ Harvey's Rid of Me. And Kurt loves the way the vocals are sounding, and I think Steve's coming around, and they decide, yes, we will work together. And so they enter the studio in February of 1993. Now, this album comes out September 21st, 1993. So, hey, relatively quick turnaround. And that has a lot to do with the fact that Steve Albini and Nirvana, Kurt, they didn't want this to take a lot of time. They didn't want months in the studio of getting everything so perfect. It had to be done in about 2 weeks. And that was the deal. That's what they agreed upon. Let's do this album in 2 weeks, give or take a day or two. And that's exactly what they did, so that there wouldn't be so much second guessing. And Steve Albini has done so many albums, and R.I.P., he passed away not too long ago, but he was known for just having this abrasive recording style of just the way that he mic'd drums and the way that he captured the real room tone and the way that he captured the way that a band sounded, kind of with no special things to boost sound. You know what I mean? It was just supposed to be the rawest form of the band. And that is why Kurt was drawn in and wanted to have Steve Albini, because he loved the production on Surfer Rosa by Pixies, and he loved production on Pod by the Breeders. And those are both Albinis. So this is what brought them together, and thank goodness they came together. And I think there was some reputation about Steve Albini. There's been some controversy about him, about things that he said and did, and he would even refer to what he did in his young days as being an edgelord and trying to say things out of shock value. And I think that there had even been this idea of the band coming in and being like, oh, he's this sexist or whatever. But apparently it was super easy to work together. They didn't have a hard time. They really understood each other. And Albini went on record and said Nirvana was great, but everybody that surrounded them, their entire, all of the people that represented, they were all the worst people that he had ever dealt with. And so he had a very strict policy of, while they were working on the record, he only talked to the band. And things were pretty smooth sailing in the studio while they were putting this album together. And I think really some of the only tension came about when Courtney Love comes on to the recording process, and she's got her own opinions, and she's confrontational. And that caused, according to the sound engineer, the sound tech, that there'd been some tension there. But I wasn't there. There's probably a lot of books and things that have been written about this, which I have not read. I'm not majorly well versed on what was going on behind the scenes with Nirvana. I was just a fan. I was just a teenage kid listening to this band and loving them. Oh, and by the way, I did put on my Nirvana t-shirt for this episode, for those of you who are only listening. It's the only one I have. I don't recall ever having a good Nirvana t-shirt in high school. I had Good Pumpkin shirts, which I just found recently, which I'm so excited about. They were hidden away in storage for like 10 years and I just found them. But no, I picked this up like a decade ago. It's just the one with the smiley face with the X's over the eyes. But hey, gotta have a Nirvana shirt. But I was a big fan. I was a big fan of this band, and I loved Nevermind. I loved Bleach. I loved the energy, the raw. It was this kind of like, I don't know what to expect next with this band. And this album is exactly this kind of, I remember putting it on and being kind of like, whoa, I didn't expect this. Yeah, there's poppy, more approachable pieces of music on it that become singles, but there was a lot of noise rock and screaming, and that's not new for Nirvana. But on Nevermind, it had this nice bridge over, and this one I felt like it was a little bit more chaotic in a lot of ways, and it probably came from Albini's style and Kurt's kind of desire to shake it up and show people I'm not what you think I am. But they were in the studio, and it was in Pachyderm Studios in Minnesota, and they really wanted the sessions to be secretive. So they chose to be called in the recording space the Simon Ritchie Band. That's what they said it was. That was what it was booked under. And that was Sid Vicious's real name from the Sex Pistols. So they were using that, and they got away with it for a little bit. But a lot of the cases, the flight cases that came in with instruments and equipment, they flew into the studio, and after a couple days, it said Nirvana on the sides, and then it gave it away. People knew that they were there. And so they were just trying to hide out from publicity photos and, press and all that kind of stuff, and fans and people trying to get into their business and be holed up. They got away with it for a little time. But Albini also only took $100,000 as a fee to record this album with no percentage points. He felt like it's kind of wrong for a producer. Well, he said more sternly, it's criminal of a producer to take this percentage of this very specific thing that they do, which is helping a band find a sound, but the sound is theirs. And so he took the fee for his services, which was a real fraction of a cost of the amount that he would have gotten had he gotten a percentage, but that was the way that he was. And there were things that would happen along the way that would really ingratiate, Albini to Cobain. And one of those was Kurt brings in a piece of a broken guitar, and he shows it to Steve. And Steve, he tells him, he's basically like, Big Black is playing this show, this really small area of where Kurt's growing up at the time. He goes and sees the show, and during the show, Albini breaks the guitar into a million pieces, and there's stuff flying everywhere. And this kid goes up and grabs a piece of guitar and turns to him and says, "Hey, can I have this?" And Albini's like, it's broken. Sure, enjoy. And it turns out that kid who did it, Kurt Cobain, a young Kurt Cobain, and Albini's like, "Wow, that was you." So huge street cred moment for Kurt as a young fan of Albini's work. And it proved that they worked together well in the recording studio. Now, there was some controversy a little bit around once it was done and everybody's finished with the recordings. And at first Kurt's very happy and everybody's like, yeah, this is what we needed to do. And it's sent off to the label and the people, the producers, and they're like, no, this is unlistenable. Like, this isn't accessible at all. This isn't going to work. And at first there's this pushback, but over time, after a couple months, there's this disconnect, right? Because I think that Cobain had an ethos of punk and hardcore and edginess and being counterculture. But I know I would be the same way when it comes to things that are dissonant or noisy. Like when I was growing up as a teenager, there would be kids that I would hang out with that they liked the fact that something recorded poorly. Like that, I think that made them feel like it's real if it's like that. And I can understand that to an extent, but my ears are my ears. You know what I mean? Like I do like it when something sounds really well made. And that's just because these things on the side of my head, they're finicky. That's why I'm not a live album person usually. I don't know if I've gone into that on this show, but I'm a studio recording person. I like to go see live music. And there's some exceptions to the rule of live albums because they become kind of ingrained in my brain. I've talked about Jane's Addiction, Triple X, that live album. That's a very important album to me because many times I heard it as a teenager. But the only way a live album is really going to be important to me is if I was there, or there's something really, and I'm wanting to relive it, or there's something spectacular about that performance that only happens in this live recording. But for the most part, I feel like a closeted producer who just wants to hear the best sound possible, the warmest, richest tones, panning a certain way, experiencing it a certain way. Like I would much rather sit in a space and listen to, on the best damn speakers in the world, a finely tuned rock album than to hear something like really raw and it's just me. That's just me. But I can appreciate in all art, right, that there's something to be said about emotion and capturing somebody in an authentic state. And you probably can say that when there's not as many bells and whistles and it's not been polished so much, that there's more opportunity to experience the raw power of an artist. So I respect that. But I think I would be like Kurt in this situation where you hear it and after a while you're like, can't really hear my voice that well. The levels are just not quite there. Nothing's standing out. So whether somebody spoke in his ear or whatever it was, he started to be like, maybe we need to remix these before we put them out there. So they bring in this guy, Bob Ludwig, and he does a remix on him. And then even further, they bring it to another guy named Steve Litt, and he's responsible for remixing Heart-Shaped Box and All Apologies. So there was some remixing happen, and Albini was very against this. He was like, no, that was not the deal. You hired me because that was it. Those were the mixes. Those were my mixes. And it was a back and forth. And then I think Chris Novoselic had to call him and say, please. And then I think he relented finally, but went on later to say that, that entire experience really hurt his career because the record labels were like, I don't want to work with Steve Albini. But this isn't really about just the producing of the record of with Steve Albini, but more about In Utero. The original title of the album was supposed to be I Hate Myself and I Want to Die, which went on to become the name of a song by the band, which is on the Beavis and Butthead album. But that was the original intention behind the name. And Cobain said, like, well, it's a joke. We're both a very serious band and we're also very satirical. We're very funny. And he was like, it was just a way of like being funny about describing his state of being. I hate myself and I want to die. And so he thought it was hilarious and he wanted to call the album that, but everybody was like, no. So he calls the album In Utero, and that's lifted from one of Courtney Love's poems, those words, In Utero. And I think that the cover matches it perfectly, right? There's something about this in utero embryonic state, and then you also have this anatomical angel, this female angel on the cover. It's basically Kurt had a Visible Man anatomic model as a kid. And so he had remembered that and he wanted to put this on the cover. So he tracks down a store in the Mall of America, a transparent toy at the Mall of America, there's a store there dedicated to like medical stuff. So he gets it, put the wings on it. And now that's an iconic, you have both the symbol of the baby, the naked baby swimming with the dollar. And then this is another one that you just see that image and you immediately recognize it as the cover. It really is amazing how he was able to do that 2 times. Bleach is a little bit more of like a garage band, it's like a negative image, but this is a picture that you could see somebody get that tattooed on their body. More so, I think, than the baby. People would probably decide to get the angel more so than the naked baby with the little penis. But let's start talking a little bit about the track listing. Because I want to see if there was anything. I hate myself, I want to die. I think that was kind of what I wanted to cover there. Yeah. Let's get into the actual album because we've already been talking here for about 20 minutes. All right. Let's start off with Serve the Servants. Okay. So the album kicks off with just all in unison coming in at once, and it's kind of like jarring like this. We actually talked about it on the episode with the Dooms about that intro, and just kind of, it's got these like jazzy picked chords, and something that stood out to me so much so, more so on the next track, Scentless Apprentice, but the drums on this album. I always joked that they sounded like they were recorded in the Bat Cave. And like, there's just something about him. And the more you understood about how he mic'd him, Albini had like 30 microphones around Dave Grohl's kit, mics everywhere, and he's really picking up the room. Some of these songs are recording like in a kitchen separate from the band, but there's just something about it. It's thunderous, cavernous, and it just like, with Dave Grohl's really strong, aggressive hits, it's just something about it. Bat Cave, the reason I use that description is it sounds like we're like in the depths of the earth to me. That's how it's always sounded. That's that opening. But Serve the Servants, Teenage Angst has paid me well. I'm bored and old. This is literally a reference to where he's been placed in life with the success of Nevermind, all over MTV, touring the world. People know who he is. Here's this person that just wants to write music. And it's like he shared his emotions, and now he's being seen as a person who's depressed and mopey and dreams up the hilarious response of, I hate myself and I want to die, to kind of be like, yeah, that's how I feel. But here's the song that kicks off the record, and it takes all of those feelings and says, here you go. This is what you wanted. Here I am. But Scentless Apprentice, this is where, when I was listening to this album for the first time, this is where I was like, oh, holy shit. It was. I made a video about once the guitar from Serve the Servants goes somewhere, and then all of a sudden you get that doom, doom, tickoo, do, 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 kickoo. Because this is the song where I was like, holy shit, this is going to be amazing. Because it opens with his drums, and then he's just really screaming with that Cobain scream that we all know and love, that sounds like otherworldly. Because some people scream, but he had his own scream. It was a very specific scream. I think you could hear it and you'd be like, that's a Cobain scream. You know what I mean? And this song was the one that I was like, we're in for a ride, I think. That song was inspired by the Jean-Baptiste Grenouille. I don't even know if I'm saying that last name. Grenouille. I'm going to say it really French. Jean-Baptiste Grenouille book called Perfume. They made a film about this. It's about a perfume maker's apprentice who decides to start killing ladies and like trying to bottle their scent to make the perfect perfume. So he was inspired by reading that book, and that's how that came about. All right, now we get to the single. We get to Heart Shaped Box. This is the debut single off this album, and I remember seeing it performed on Saturday Night Live. I remember seeing the video debut. I remember just the excitement of this video dropping, the really vibrant colors, and a crucifixion scene, which had me going like, looking over my shoulder. Mom and Dad, don't see me watch this. There's no blasphemy here, I promise. But of course, that was the panic of mine, was the Heart Shaped Box. But what a kick-ass song. Still a classic. I play this with my band, Temple of the Dads. We cover Heart Shaped Box. We cover a couple things off of Nevermind, and off of this album in particular. All we've really done is Heart Shaped Box, and then I've done solo versions of Dumb. But I suppose we could probably do, an All Apologies or something like that. But Heart Shaped Box seems to be a good one to do because everybody gets super into it when you get to the hey, wait. It really brings back memories. It reminds me into like Wayne's World. I remember them doing things like he's hearing hey, wait, and he's replacing it with like hey, Wayne. Just these things that I remember from that time. But the song's title was supposed to be Heart Shaped Coffin. That was originally it. And then he changes it to Heart Shaped Box. And apparently Kurt and Courtney She gave him a heart-shaped box and had a bunch of weird shit in there, like a doll's head or whatever. And they became kind of fixated on this idea of heart-shaped boxes and heart-shaped coffins. And that's how you get the name of that song. And we're going to get to the really controversial title song. Then even during the time, it was really hard for people to wrap their heads around what he was trying to say lyrically. And he always felt it's very obviously a female empowered song that is anti-rape. That is what he felt. But it was amazing how many times people were like, well, what are you trying to accomplish with this? Now, these songs, several of these songs on this album are not from like writing it right before they go into the studio. Like, they're older songs, and these songs were written 90, 91, recorded as demos, performed a couple places before they get into the studio for In Utero. So a lot of these songs are coming out now, but they've been in the works for years in different variations, and Rape Me is one of those. And the earliest glimpse that we didn't even know we were getting, a famous moment, was in 1992 at the MTV Music Awards. Nirvana is going up, and this is also the famous Hi Axel, Hi Axel. So if you don't know, there was a lot of beef between Nirvana and Guns N' Roses because of things said and the way that Kurt viewed Axel and said bad shit, and it went back and forth. So there's a ton of stuff about that, but this is the performance where they're at the Music Awards, and MTV has asked them, like, play Lithium. And they're like, no, we want to play this song called Rape Me. And MTV is like, no, don't do that, please. And so, it's live. It's going right to the band. And the opening notes, he starts playing the opening strumming notes.
And now for all your lawn care needs, it's Nirvana.
So I was watching that performance as it happened in 1992. This is a year before we get this song. And I don't think I picked up in that live performance that he said, Rape Me. I don't know if they bleeped it or whatever. All I know is that MTV was this close to cutting away from the live broadcast because he was this close to violating what he said he wouldn't do. And that was so him, right? But he stops and goes into Lithium. And then they trash the set, and Dave comes out and goes, Hi, Axl. And everybody's like, oh, shit, starting beef backstage with Axl Rose. But the thing about Rape Me, I wish I could say that I had a understanding of what we were really dealing with. It's not that I wasn't familiar with what that was as a teenager in 1993. Like, I knew. But being kind of sheltered, innocent boy and being introduced to terrible notions through film and music, it's not like they were a part of my life. It's not anything that I had been around or experienced. I had a very sheltered youth. So that word, while people told me this is a terrible thing, and I'm like, I know it's a terrible thing, I don't think I knew what it meant in some way at its core. That might sound insane to some of you, but as a teenager, I was like, I knew that this thing existed, but it just didn't seem like anything other than like that. Well, that's what a criminal would do. You know what I mean? It just didn't seem like it was something that could run around amongst people my age, teenagers, and of course it could. But I was so sheltered from it that just seemed like well, yeah, he wrote a song and he's saying this and whoa, so controversial. But it would be much later in life that I would really understand the gravitas, whether it was I witnessed in a film a terrible, shocking scene, and I was like, oh my God, and just disgusted. Or, you are interacting with somebody once you get to be in your older teens, college, young adult life that had faced something so horrible. And I'm sure hearing that song for some people is very hard and was very hard and continues to be very hard. So if this is uncomfortable for you, I understand, because it's not an easy subject. But I think that what Kurt was trying to do, and he said in interviews, he was saying it was like the like the woman saying, you kill me, you're going to make me stronger. You know, you think you're getting me from this? Fine, go ahead and take me like this. You just wait, because I'm going to get you so bad. I'm going to get you back so bad, karmically or whatever it is. Like, you have no idea who you're fucking with, you know? So I can appreciate that sentiment, but boy, it probably went over like a lead balloon in so many places because it's just a tough subject. And Walmart and places like that at the time refused to carry an album that said "Rape Me" on the back cover. So the band agreed to change it to "Waif Me," it said on the back of it. So I think my copy must not have been from Walmart, because I remember mine saying the words on the back. But the band agreed to it, and you might be surprised, like, oh, the guy who went up to the music awards and the guy who was really kind of pushing boundaries, he would agree to do that? Well, it's important to know that when he was a kid, he didn't have access to record stores where he grew up. He could only buy records at Walmart. And he was like, well, I'm not going to take away the chance for some kid out there whose only way to buy an album, only way to buy a record is at Walmart. So I want my record to be there for the kid who wants to get it and can't be like at the coolest record stores in the world. You know, so he understood the plight of kids growing up in areas, in a lot of ways like me. I wasn't going to cool record stores. I would find one downtown Tulsa later, Mohawk Music, but you know, that's not something I could just get to all the time. It's more likely you'd buy an album at a chain or a mall. So good on him for calling it "Waif Me." Well, now we get to what is quite possibly my favorite Nirvana song on In Utero. Frances Farmer will have her revenge on Seattle. A long title. And one thing I didn't know is that length of that title. Now, here's something that's funny. We've talked about on this show before about super long song titles. From the emo days that got super long to American Football to Fiona Apple, When the Pawn. These very long titles to things. But at the time, it was really indie and edgy to have like a monosyllabic, like short word song. And so this was Cobain's way of being like, I'm going to play against that trope. And I'm going to call this song something that is a very long title. And he was inspired by a book called Shadowland from 1978 that he read in school about Frances Farmer, who was an actress who was involuntarily committed, had, you know, psychological issues. And I think there were even rumors around possible lobotomies and all this stuff around this woman, this public figure's life, this actress. And he had been kind of fascinated with her story. And so, but what makes this song my favorite is just the way we navigate through it. And then he gets to that refrain, I miss the comfort in being sad. I've said it before. It's come up in another episode where I'm not even talking about Nirvana. I'm talking about that sentiment. I miss the comfort in being sad and what that feels like, because you are probably like me, and that there's great solace in feeling sad and allowing yourself to be in that space. We oftentimes don't want to feel that way, but if we were to lose that, we'd lose a lot of ourselves. The ability to be melancholy and feel the dark. I miss the comfort in being sad. And whether that comes from being medicated or being told you have to be happy, but just finding that space. And so every time I hear him say that, especially knowing what would come after, it echoes through my spirit, and it has always struck me, and it still strikes me to this day. Now, Dumb, this is a song apparently Kurt wrote in 30 minutes in 1990. So there you go. This guy knows how to whip up a song pretty fast, much more in terms of like, you know, pop string arrangements, more accessible. This is definitely were being written after Bleach, before Nevermind, in that era. And, you know, you get the sense of what the song is about. And I think it's something that a lot of us who feel a lot of emotions, ups and downs, highs and lows, feel. And you can't really say it out loud. It's like, oh, I wish I was dumb, because then I wouldn't be worried. Because it makes you sound arrogant, right? Like, I'm not an idiot. I'm very smart. I am very smart. They even have that Reddit I am very smart. You can't really say that out loud, but the sentiment is true, right? Is you meet people in life that just kind of seem to be unaffected. I'm not saying they all are. There's probably a lot of people that put on a brave face forward. You, for example, who don't know me, a lot of people say, like, somebody just said this to me the other day on a video. He's like, you're always so happy in your videos. Have you ever had a bad day in your life? And I'm like, dude, right now, listeners, I am shooting a come on now look to the camera. Me? Because if you've listened to Waterproof Records, if you've listened to this show, you've heard about some heavy shit. And we're actually going to get into some heavy shit on this episode too. But I tend to put the bright and sunny disposition out there in the world and share that with everybody because I didn't build my social media platform on being sad. I built it on being an entertainer. But boy, oh boy, do I have the dark days. And there are people that you meet in life that it seems as though they aren't troubled, that they get up and go to work and they enjoy a Baskin Robbins and they go to the park and they see a movie and they go home and they go to sleep and they seem to be fine. And when you get into a conversation with them, they seem like nothing is really weighing heavily on them. And is it fair to call that person dumb? No. But is it possible that that person just is not connected to a lot of the same things that artistic, music-loving people are? Yeah, I think it's fair to say that, you know, they might have a couple free brain waves, not committed to sadness and emotion all the time. So I think that that's the sentiment behind Dumb. I love playing that song. I love playing it acoustic. It charted, and it was never released as a single. It's a great tune, and I love it very much. Now, on the back half of In Utero, we really come out with some heavy songs, some noise rock. Like he had gone on record to say, he said it's, you know, Nevermind was like pop songs that were kind of disguised with a distortion and some screams here and there. And I think that there's still elements of that on this album, but he really leaned harder into the noise rock and the chaotic. And when we get to Very Ape, that's where you get it. You know, this is another one that I think drums were recorded in the kitchen, out of the sky into the ground, the lyrics. And this is the way that it kind of comes in. Really kick-ass song. Okay. My favorite screamer on the album. Francis Farmer was the one with the refrain. I miss the comfort of being sad, but Milk It. Oh, I love this one. Oh, I love it so much. Milk It. This is one where just the way the drums are kind of like, the way that they're syncopated, like a heart rate that's kind of, something's off, like it has arrhythmia or something. And the way that the guitar is kind of like plunking around in these somewhat out of tune little, you know, little plunks around on there. And the bass, I'm just moving my body as I'm trying to describe this into words. The bass is just like, it's like just like slowly crawling towards you like a monster. And then this heartbeat and this thing's plucking. And then all of a sudden he just kicks in with the riff. And I always thought he said dull steak, test meat. That's what I thought he was saying. Dull steak, test meat. But when I was looking it up, somebody said doll steak, D-O-L-L, and that would fall in line more with like Courtney Love, dolls, doll stuff, but I always thought it was dull steak. But oh my God, I love how he screams his part, and then of course the best is where he does the it's like a smirking laugh with a scream. And this one will always get me into that, like, I wanna break shit. I wanna like jump around in my room like I'm a teenager. That Milk It. Oh, Milk It. Now, Penny Royalty. This, my friends, was supposed to be the next single before Kurt died. This was slated to be released that April, and there was a copy of it that went out. There was a single that was released, and I think that they were recalled. And apparently this is like one of the holy grails of collector's items for Nirvana fanatics that want to find the Penny Royalty single. So if you have it out there, hang on to it. That thing's pretty valuable. But this single doesn't really get to have the light of day that it's meant to. And I think it's been played on the radio. And obviously there was a version from MTV's Unplugged, which is in itself a very amazing performance. And I wonder if I could ever do a Waterproof Records on a Unplugged. Possibly could. Maybe we'll get there at some point. But when he performs Penny Royalty on Unplugged, he sings it kind of on his own. And the thing that always stands out to me about that is just like how high that T is, and then even on the recording, the high screeching in the background. Now, Penny Royalty is, I think, historically was a kind of a tea that had toxic properties and was known to induce an abortion or a miscarriage or menstruation. And it was very dangerous. Like, it was something that I think there was maybe some folklore around it. And there's been some ideas of this is a metaphor for drug addiction. It's a metaphor for drinking something and wanting it to die from within you. It's a lot of metaphors here, but there's a lot of things in here that really echo through me, and one of them is give me a Leonard Cohen afterworld. I love that idea, so I can sigh eternally. What a great way of putting it. I was a Leonard Cohen fan by this time because I had already heard Pump Up the Volume, and I think around this time also I was getting my hands on some of the best of Leonard Cohen. And of course he would include that lyric in there. But Penny Royalty, that's another older song. One of those songs that's recorded 90, 91, back when Dave Grohl and Kurt are sharing a space together, and Dave, meanwhile, is recording stuff on a 4-track in his room and trying to keep quiet, and that'll come up in a second. Now, radio-friendly unit shifter. What do you think that title's referring to? Do you think it's referring to something like Smells Like Teen Spirit? It's a radio-friendly song that's going to shift units. Everybody's going to go buy it because it's so radio-friendly. Definitely taking the piss out of his own music in this song. Starts with that squealing feedback in the beginning. And I don't know, maybe if you're a listener to the show, you can tell me. I have a memory of that squealing feedback from the beginning of radio-friendly unit shifter being used on something on MTV. Like, I don't know why this image keeps playing in my head, but on Tool videos, how there's like that meat moving through a tube in some of the Tool videos. I can't remember which one, if that's in Sober. I think it's in Sober. It's not in one of the other ones, but it's like meat and it's going through this like tube. And for some reason, I see that image every time I hear radio-friendly unit shifters opening the feedback. And I'm like, did they use it on MTV for one of those cuts of a bunch of different videos? They would like borrow from Megadeth's Peace Sells on the news, or they would take like this excerpt from a song and it would become like a piece that they would run in their media. And I feel like it was used for that, but I went searching for it and I couldn't find it. But another blisteringly like intense, what is wrong with me? Dun, 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 dun. There's a touch of Foo Fighters in this, and I mean that you could hear Dave's inspiration from this type of sound that Nirvana had. I mean, you can hear it a ton in a lot of Nirvana, but I hear that breakdown, and that sounds like something that Dave Grohl would have done in the Foo Fighters. That same kind of sequence right there. One of the last absolute chaotic beasts on the album is Tourette's. Starts with just somebody very dignified going moderate rock, and then boy, oh boy, not only is the riff chaotic, not only the drums recorded in the kitchen and sounding just as bat-cavey as ever, but he's just screaming. It's just unintelligible. It's like I don't even know what the fuck he's saying, but count me in. I'm going to tear my walls off. The drywall is going to be under my fingernails. I can't stand anymore. This teenage angst is going to burst out of my skin when I hear Tourette's. I'm going insane with that one. And that is really that last piece of, all right, now before we get out of here on In Utero, we're going to give you all apologies. A very pleasant sounding piece of music that has cello in it. They recorded with cello. They performed it with cello. And the version that we get played for us all the time, of course, was MTV's Unplugged. And that has a lot to do with the fact that it was supposed to be released, and Kurt Cobain has not come up with any ideas for a music video. He's just lazy, not wanting to get around to it. He's blaming it on being bogged down with a tour. But we know he's not going to be with us much longer after this period of time. So I can only imagine that things like making sure you get a music video filmed and you have this creative vision achieved are becoming less and less important as these realities and heavinesses are sinking upon him. But it's an amazing song. I love the version on this record. I love the one that's on MTV's Unplugged, but I got to be honest, I love the one on In Utero more than the Unplugged. I think that's a great one, but there's so many other moments on MTV's Unplugged that stand out to me as like, wow, that's an incredible moment. And all apologies, that version, the Unplugged version, they played it to death. They played it a lot. So now when I hear the In Utero version, I'm actually kind of stoked when I hear the distortion come in, because I'm like, oh, good. It's the studio album version. Yay. There are so many things that I kind of discovered that I didn't really know while I was researching into this album, because like you know about me, I'm a fan, and you kind of only had so much room in your brain growing up as a teen in the 90s to kind of obsess over so many artists. And while I absolutely love Nirvana, I didn't get to that obsession level of what they were doing and what they were up to. And one of the things that I didn't know was on the non-US version of this album, of In Utero, after All Apologies ends, you wait about 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden, a bonus track appears to the non-US version. So for those of you who are listening overseas, Latin America, other countries, not in the US, our album ended on All Apologies. But your album, wait 20 minutes, and you get Gallons of Rubbing Alcohol Flow Through the Strip, which is now on deluxe editions, and you can go listen to it. If you go get the In Utero deluxe edition, it's right there after you finish All Apologies. It's there. So in the non-US version, you wait 20 minutes, you get that song. And apparently inside the CD booklet, it called that piece of music Devalued American Purchase Incentive Track, which is pretty funny. Because I think that when they were putting it out, the label was putting it out, they were trying to incentivize people in non-US countries to buy the album because there was this special thing on there for them. So that was on that. And I didn't know that. I actually had no idea. I had known the song Gallons of Rubbing Alcohol. I was familiar from the deluxe editions, but I didn't know it was included on the non-US version. And then, of course, another B-side from Heart Shaped Box was Marigold, which famously has Dave Grohl singing, and he wrote it as well. And there's some mystery behind that. Like I mentioned earlier, Dave had said he was living with Kurt and would record things on his own. He had his own side project at the time of, Pocket Watch was the name of the album, and what's the name of the band? Late, I think. And he had recorded some demos and songs, and I think that Kurt heard him recording the melody for Marigold, and he came into his room and was like, "What's that?" And then they were kind of sitting there together working on this song. And there was a time when they were recording In Utero that Albini was like, well, maybe Marigold should be on the album. And that was like a moment of panic for Dave Grohl, because he was like, what's the last thing a drummer hears, says before he's fired? And it's like, hey, I wrote a song. So he was like, no, I don't want to overstep. I don't want to overstep at all. But that piece of music, Marigold, again, you can hear as a bonus track that's released on a lot of posthumous stuff after Kurt dies. And then the Foo Fighters put it on something that they released in the mid 2000s as well. So it's like a one song that bridges between two projects. But that is In Utero. And I'm actually going to do something that's kind of unprecedented. I'm looking at the time right now. We've been talking for 52 minutes. I'm going to do something that I've never done on the show before. And I'm going to do it in such a way that if I really feel like I want to cut it, I can, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to leave, because I'm going to talk about something really heavy. I'm going to get real. And if you're just a music fan and you enjoy my takes on things, and that's all you're here for, that's all you signed up for, that's the only reason you downloaded, that's the only reason you put the earbuds in, it's the only reason you're on YouTube, I'm going to give you a chance to just, that's it, hit end. Because we did it. We spent about an hour talking about Nirvana's In Utero. I played some clips. It was pleasant. A lot of memories. A little bit of controversial stuff about the lyrics and language of one of the songs. But given what I need to talk about, I am going to use this platform to do it. And say what you want about this. But I need it. I need to do it. Because honestly, I don't know where else to go with it. And I think there's enough of you out there that might be interested to listen and might need to hear it. So this is the last time that I'm going to give you the warning, but I am going to talk about suicide. Because that's what we face with Nirvana here. And it has recently impacted my life. Last chance. I'm going to try not to edit the language. And I'm just going to say the things because we've gotten ourselves in a world now where people say unalive because they want their video to go on TikTok and they don't want it to get censored. But I'm just going to say the things. And I apologize to my family for saying this in such a public arena. But this past weekend, my cousin took his own life. He decided it was his time to go. And I don't know any other detail than that. And we can leave it at that. And you might be like, why are you bringing your personal life stuff here? But this was a big deal, cousin. Sure, in the past 15 years, even more, hadn't been involved in each other's lives very much. But as a child, growing up, this was a big deal, cousin. This was an every weekend, cousin. Saw them constantly. I started playing guitar because I wanted to be like them. I got introduced to bands. I got copies and dubs of Guns N' Roses and Metallica, and because they had all the cool music, because they were just a little bit older than me and just a tad older than my brother by a couple months. Huge part of my adolescence. Huge part of my youth. And there's so many of you out there in the world that thought has never crossed your mind. And thank goodness. But there's some of us that it gets in there. It creeps in your head. And it never leaves you. I was just talking to somebody the other day. Before all the high school shootings began in Columbine, it felt like that when we were growing up, it was like, if you were a troubled kid, it was just about taking yourself out of the equation. And then all of a sudden, once the shootings began, it was like, anytime you were a troubled kid, it's like, well, now it's multiple choice. Do you take yourself out or do you take everybody else out with you? But there was a time before all that, it was just like, if you're just miserable and you don't want to do it anymore, you just want to quiet it all, you want to go. You want to leave. And that thought occurred to me by the time I was like 15 or 16 years old. Because sometimes you just think, one, you're a burden on everybody else. And also you just think sometimes it just would be easier to not be here anymore. And that feeling stays with you. It's like a little parasite. And the weirdest thing is, in the past 4 or 5 years that I've been making videos, it has been the most gone ever since I was 15. I would say from the time I was a late teenager up until being 42. I was always a little scared. And my kids have kept me alive. My family has kept me alive. The fear of what it would cause to others has kept me alive. Keeping as busy as possible. And entertaining and creating has kept me alive. Because you're always kind of like, oh, it'd be a lot easier if I wasn't here. But when I started making these things, when I started making these videos, it sounds insane. My life suddenly got filled with so much purpose because I felt a huge purpose in bringing joy and making people smile. And that's a crazy thing, because that can be the Robin Williams path, where you're so caught up in making everybody laugh that you neglect your own spirit. And I try not to do that. I try to be mindful of my spirit and how I'm doing, because I got really good at paying attention and making sure that I wasn't going too far off the deep end. But in the past 4 years of making videos and the podcast and talking to people about music, it's not been about music. That's been huge because it's medicinal. But bringing a part of me and showing it to you out there, and you feeling an elevation in your life, has just changed the reverberation of how I feel in this universe. It's just changed it for the better. It's like I was going my whole life, like, what am I supposed to do? And then I started doing this thing, and everything just started to resonate and be clear. And don't get me wrong, I'm not like every day of my life in the past 30 years, I haven't been trying to off myself, but I've always faced this dark, scary thing. And I'm sure many of you have too. And when Kurt did it, I was so young that it was just fucked up and it was jarring. But you have this morbid fascination as a teenager. And you're just kind of like, oh my God. And there's all these things swirling around. Well, did he do it, or did somebody else do it? Was it Courtney? Was it, all these things that people said. And I'm like, no. To this day, I'm like, no, it's just a guy who didn't want to be in that position anymore and wanted out. And there's drugs involved, and alcohol and heroin and things that'll take you out of your right mind and distort reality. And I'm only sharing this with you today because if you're out there, it's hard for me to not feel responsible for not reaching out to my cousin. I wish I had. My mom, my brother would say, you can't blame yourself. And anybody would say, you can't blame yourself. You can't. Wish I had, though. His name was Ben. And when we were teenagers, he was a good guitar player. He was always a good guitar player. And I borrowed a digital delay pedal from him as a teenager. Blue one. DOD. Can't remember the name of the brand, but I borrowed it from him. And I was young when I borrowed it from him. And then years went by. I don't know if you remember how years felt when you're in like middle school to high school. It feels like an eternity. So over time, I'm kind of like, I'd forgotten really. I mean, I did, and I knew it was his pedal, but I kind of thought in some part of my mind like that he didn't care. He never asked for it back. And I remember we were picking up and we were moving to Wheaton, and it was either when we moved to Wheaton or when I moved out, but I was moving and I decided to pawn the guitar pedal. And I'd had it for like 3 or 4 years in my things. And I pawned the guitar pedal, got some money to put towards something else that I got. Like I was trying to buy a guitar and I was using it. And I remember I saw him a while later, a couple of years later. And he was like, "Hey, do you sell that digital delay pedal?" And I was like, I sold it. And I felt a huge amount of shame. Because I knew it was his. I don't know why I thought I had the right to sell his pedal. And he was like, "You sold my pedal?" And I was like, I think I lied and was like, "I didn't even remember it was yours." I mean, I think of the whole time I knew it was his. But I thought, I don't know why I did it. And I'm telling you this story. Because about 2 weeks ago, I had a dream about him. And I had a dream, and in the dream, he was hurting. He was not doing okay, and he was taking it out on me. And I woke up, and I told my wife about it. And the first thought I had was, I'm going to buy that pedal. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to buy that same digital delay pedal and I'm going to send it to him. I'm going to find where he is. And 30 years, 25 years later, I'm going to send him the pedal and I'm going to say, "Sorry about the pedal. Here it is." I had that thought. And then just within days later, I heard that news and I just wish I'd sent him the pedal. When people leave you that way, it's frustrating. But you also get it. It's two things. You're like, I know what you're talking about because I think about that all the time as an option. And then you go, but I'm pissed because I've made it this long. Then you can make it too. You can stick it out. You can figure out a way that it's not impossible. I had that feeling when Trevor Stranad from Black Dahlia Murder, when that happened. And that's not even somebody I knew on a personal level. That was just somebody I loved his music. But you get mad because you're like, I think I put it to somebody like this. I said, it's like you've waited in a line at an amusement park to get on a ride. You're like waiting and you've waited for 2 hours. And it's like somebody who just decides to get out of the line way too soon. I mean, you know, they've waited as long as you have, if not longer. And then they just get up and leave. And you're like, you're now? And it's like when people do that, you're like, you're going to bail on me now? We've made it to this chapter in our lives. But sometimes life is unbearable for some and feels like there's just a point of no return. And when they make that decision, you go, I can't blame you because I know what it feels like to want out. But I wish you would have just waited another day. Or I wish you would have talked to somebody, or I wish I would have sent you the digital delay pedal, or I wish I'd been there, or I wish I don't know. But if you're struggling, if you're down, you are not alone. And maybe that's all I'm here to tell you. And I don't even know if I'm going to fucking put this on the show because it's dark, it's heavy, it's so vulnerable, it's so personal. But I'm going to put it out there, I think, because I think that somebody out there, you need to know that you're not alone. And if you go, you're going to be missed. And people are going to be like, I wish I'd sent that pedal, and I wish I'd called them up, and I wish I'd text them. So hang in there. We're still on the line for the ride. I'm still here. You're still here. And, you know, there's the old saying, check on your happy friends. I mean, duh. That's obvious. You should just check on all your friends, you know. Make sure everybody's doing okay. Because everybody's got their own shit. And even if the song says, I wish I was dumb, that I didn't feel this stuff, you never know what somebody's going through. I didn't think that would happen. And then when it did happen, I was like, oh, it does make sense why it would happen. Anyway. If you made it this far, if this is actually going on the show, then I know it was both a episode about an album and In Utero, and it was also me sharing some really heavy shit. So if you stuck it out with me, thank you. I appreciate you. And thanks for letting me use this platform as a place to talk about what I'm going through. And I hope it helps with whatever you're going through. And I hope you find a way to just keep going, because I have. And thanks to you, and thanks to what I do here, thanks to all of this, I've been able to feel a real purpose in life. So I have you to thank, because you've kept me going. I'm ending there. I'm not saying anything else about clicks and see you next time.